So with Pokemon ZA coming out a few weeks ago, well, at least at the time of this video going live, I thought it was time I finally did that Pokemon Gold and Silver video I promised to do 4 months ago. Man, I have put this off. So, hey, I'm Remy, and if you got a minute, let me over-explain the history of Pokemon Gold and Silver. Because if you didn't know, Pokemon Gold and Silver weren't just sequels, they were the moment Pokemon went from cool trend to a cultural icon. Released on the Game Boy Color, they marked the second generation of the series, but they didn't just add new Pokemon, they doubled the size of the world. You started in Johto, a brand new region full of weirdos, legends, and new creatures, but then, this is the best part, just when you thought you were done, credits roll, and then all of a sudden the game goes, hey yo kid, you remember Kanto? And suddenly you realize you had 2 full games in that tiny cartridge. And as a kid, that feeling, at least for me, was unmatched. Gold and Silver introduced 100 new Pokemon, new types, new systems, and somehow it ran on a piece of hardware that could barely display color on the Game Boy Color. These games were a masterclass in innovation disguised as a children's RPG. This game had a real-time clock that changed what Pokemon appeared depending on day or night. You could breed Pokemon, give them held items, and even encounter shiny Pokemon. A concept so simple yet so impactful, it ruined thousands of kids' free times forever, and also made the career of hundreds of Poketubers, because you know what, who doesn't like a shiny version of a Pikachu? And somehow, even with all that innovation, this game still had time for Team Rocket's grand comeback. These guys came back one more time just to lose to another 10-year-old. You gotta love the commitment to the bit because these guys were a joke. Unless we're talking about the manga, and that's a whole other thing, and we'll get there. But here's the crazy part. All those features, all those regions, and all that content, it shouldn't have been possible. The Game Boy Color cartridge, it did not have the facilities to hold all that code. But one man at Nintendo said, yo, I got this. And he went to work. And that's where the story of Pokemon Gold really starts, with a coding miracle that saved the future of the series. So let's rewind a bit. Let's talk about the dreamer who caught the first bug, the magazine company that went broke trying to make video games, and how one impossible coding trick made Pokemon the juggernaut it is today. So stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll find out how this one sheer act of coding magic turned a little cartridge into one of the greatest RPGs of your childhood. So hey, I'm Remy. I'm here to yap about Pokemon, so let's stop wasting time and let's just get into it. Every massive franchise starts with one weird kid and a strange obsession, and for Pokemon we have no one else but the GOAT himself, Satoshi Tajiri. As a youth, Satoshi grew up in suburban Tokyo catching bugs, not for science and not for money, just because he thought bugs were cool, which is kinda based. His childhood was basically Animal Crossing, but with more dirt and fewer raccoons taking your money every other update. Cause, bro, Animal Crossing. Tom, we got beef in every generation of Animal Crossing. I just need you to know that. We are never gonna be cool. But as the city grew, the forest which he loved so much as a kid started to disappear, and the world that inspired him to go out there and search started to get paved over. So he decided if the kids couldn't go outside and find creatures anymore, well, he might as well bring the creatures to them. And was born this idea, this simple idea of collecting, connecting, and trading. This became the core of Pokemon. But before we get into all this Pokemon lore, and I mean like not the cool stuff with Suicune and Ho-Oh and all the other mysticals, I mean the actual lore of the franchise, we should talk about the studio first, Game Freak. So before they were charging AAA game prices for games that had a $20 budget, I'm looking directly at you, Scarlet and Violet, I ain't forget. This game is trash, bro. Wait a second. Actual trash, and I probably should take out the trash. Actually, that, you know, it's pretty full. Okay, I'm gonna do that. Look at my Crocs. Okay. Ain't no way I forgot, man. That's a whole other conversation. So, before the games, before the plushies, before the billion-dollar IP, Game Freak was just making magazines, actually. I mean, talk about humble origins, right? So when they say Game Freak in the title, they meant they were just really interested in games. So much so that they made a magazine just to talk about arcade games. Like, that's honestly pretty cool. And somehow this evolved into a dev team that somehow actually started making video games. For example, you have Mindle Palace, which for fun fact, almost no one played. If you meet someone who told you they played this game, 9 times out of 10, they're probably lying. So don't get me wrong, I'm not calling them a liar if they say they play it, but I'm also not calling them a truther, that's for sure. Okay, that's my first Drake and Josh reference. I feel like I've earned it at this point. I have done so many videos. Let me have this, alright? But regardless of the fact, Nintendo saw potential in Satoshi's brain. He pitched Pokemon as a game about discovering and trading tiny creatures between a Game Boy using a link cable. A social experiment on a system with no social features. It shouldn't have worked by all means and measurements. That makes no sense. But it did. And guess what? That's not even the cool part. Satoshi the Madman himself, he didn't stop after Gen 1 did amazing overall. He directed Pokémon Gold and Silver right afterwards, determined to make the sequel feel even bigger, smarter, and more alive. Because if Red and Blue were the experiment, well, Gold and Silver are proof of concept. But even the most epic games need a killer soundtrack, and that's where Junichi Masuda comes in. Masuda started at Game Freak as a programmer and a composer. This is the man that was responsible for making your Game Boy Color speakers sing. He was also the sub-director and game designer for Gold and Silver, crafting not only the structure, but its sound. That iconic Johto music that feels like nostalgia in audio form, yeah, that's all him, baby. Also, side note, not only did he direct the music, he would later go on to direct the best upcoming gens in Pokemon in my opinion. But that's for another video, but back on topic. While Satoshi designed the world, Masuda gave it life. One built the vision, the other composed the champion battle theme, which is a banger, man. Like, come on, that's some heat right there. And even after Gold and Silver, where Satoshi stepped down to oversee the franchise as a whole, Masuda took up the director chair. And clearly, we were in some really good hands. And even if we fast forward to the 2020s, we can still see that Masuda is shaping the brand as a chief creative fellow at the Pokemon Company. And as for Satoshi, he's doing alright. He's the president and representative director of Game Freak, and is also an executive producer when it comes to Pokemon as a whole. So he's still involved, just in different ways nowadays. So the guy who just wanted kids to experience the magic of catching something special did something kind of impossible and made catching something special a part of everyone's lives. But don't get me wrong, as positive as that just was, there were still ups and downs. To be exact, keeping Game Freak alive as a company was almost impossible at the time. So let's talk about that, right? So as I mentioned earlier, before Game Freak was this billion-dollar studio with Pikachu as his mascot, instead of coding, they were making handwritten gaming zines. Which, if you've seen a zine, they're not the most impressive thing. Honestly, they were stapled together by two friends that had way too much free time, Satoshi and Ken Sugimori. My guys, they loved games. They wrote about them, they made magazines about them, and they literally sold the magazines themselves. Like, they were dedicated to the craft. You gotta respect it. And at its peak, this little zine called Game Freak was moving up to maybe 10,000 copies potentially, which, in all honesty, is not bad for something made with pen and paper and sheer obsession. But after years of critiquing games, Satoshi had finally hit that point that we all eventually reach as creators/consumers. Hey, you know what? Low-key, high-key, I can make something better than this. What are we talking about? But unlike the most of us, he actually did something. He taught himself programming by taking apart gaming consoles and figuring out how they work, reverse engineering at its finest. Because clearly, sleeping was an option in the 80s. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's still an option in the Big 25. It is currently 2:30 a.m. when I'm recording this, so yeah. But through all those trials and tribulations of learning how to code and game dev by himself, by 1989, he officially founded Game Freak Company Limited. No office, no big team, just a handful of friends trying to turn passion into pixels. This was the equivalent of a garage band, but like, we all know how this garage band turned out, so hey, yo, it's pretty crazy. But as crazy as it will get, everyone has to start somewhere, and Game Freak is no exception. Their early projects were kinda all over the place. Super unique puzzle titles like Mendel's Palace once again, platformers like Smart Ball, and even collaborations with Nintendo with Yoshi and Mario and Wario. They also developed Postman for Sega, a game where the main character looks really like a Mega Man EXE character. I mean, look at this guy right here. That's not like Proto Man adjacent or Mega Man EXE adjacent. You know what I'm saying? Either way, because none of these titles compared to what came next. Around 1990, Satoshi had his big idea. He was looking at the Game Boy link cable and thought, what if creatures could move through that wire? It's with that spark of imagination mixed with his childhood love of catching bugs would soon give birth to the greatest game IP of all time, Pocket Monsters, as we know today as Pokemon. The problem, no one thought it would work. For those uninformed, the development of Pokemon Red and Green took 6 years, and during that time, it nearly bankrupted Game Freak. Satoshi didn't take salary, 5 staff members quit, and the studio barely survived. But one thing saved them, surprisingly enough, their relationship with Nintendo. Thanks to earlier collaborations, Satoshi had earned the trust of Shigeru Miyamoto, who believed in the concept, which helped form Creatures Inc. And now with Nintendo backing the project in exchange for shares of the rights, this game could finally take off the ground, which, by the way, was the best investment on a wild shot you could ever imagine, because, oh my gosh, the foresight this man had is crazy. Clearly, he not that much foresight, but like, just imagine you're the guy that gave Pokemon that investment, bro. Like, you got that for the rest of your life. That's a title within itself. Like, hey, I'm the reason this exists. Like, oh, dude, like the roses this man must have earned in Nintendo is insane. And so when Pokemon Red and Green launched in 1996, they didn't just sell well, they exploded, turning Game Freak from a struggling indie studio to a heart of a global phenomenon. But Satoshi and his team didn't stop to celebrate, they immediately started working on a sequel. Because you gotta strike while the iron's hot, you gotta move when you got some motion. So now we get to Gold and Silver, a project meant to show that Pokemon wasn't a one-hit wonder. Development was not smooth though. Originally planned for 1998 on the original Game Boy, it faced major delays because the team was stretched thin, juggling Pokemon Stadium and the international release of Red and Blue took a lot out of people. It took nearly 3.5 years just to finish that alone, and not to mention the massive undertaking of trying to put 2 regions on that cartridge. This was just a big project. But man, when they finally finished and dropped that in 1999, it wasn't just a hit. It was proof that lightning could strike twice. Game Freak had gone from a couple of guys stapling together magazines to running one of the most important video game studios in history. And if that's not a come-up story, I don't know what is. But another thing that just came up with them is the money, because these sales are outrageous. Yo, that kind of sounded crazy, but whatever. When it comes to Pokemon Gold and Silver, it didn't just sell, these games exploded on the market. When these games dropped, the hype was already volcanic from Red and Blue, but Gold and Silver didn't just ride that wave, they made a whole new tsunami. In Japan, over 1.4 million copies flew off the shelves in a single weekend, man! You can't even call that a sales launch, that might as well have been a national event. Then came the US releases, and somehow the numbers got even more insane. Another 1.4 million copies sold in the first week alone, making Gold and Silver the fastest selling game in America at the time. Put that into perspective, that's faster than Mario and Zelda. And by the time all the sales were done and counted, 23.73 million copies of Gold and Silver had been sold worldwide. And if you throw in Pokemon Crystal into the mix, you're looking at a total of 30 million copies for Gen 2. Like, that's not a sequel, that's a cultural takeover, man. And for Game Freak, that wasn't just success, that was salvation and vindication. See, as I mentioned earlier, the first Pokemon game nearly bankrupted the company, right? So when Red and Green did really well sales-wise, that was pretty great. Also, for context, I keep saying Red and Green and not Red and Blue because in Japan, they didn't get Blue version. Blue was an international release thing. Regardless, when it comes to Gold and Silver, those games made sure they could breathe forever. So this wasn't just about the money, it was about proof. It was proof that Pokemon wasn't a fluke, it was a phenomenon. A global powerhouse with a fat yellow mouse as its mascot. Don't give me that skinny new stuff. From this point on, Game Freak wasn't some scrappy underdog studio. They were now a creative core of what would become the highest grossing media franchise in the world. Movies, cards, animes, merch, borderline okay games. We're getting a bit better on the Switch too, but we can ignore Scarlet and Violet. Regardless, it all loops back to this moment. So yeah, Gold and Silver didn't just break sales records, they cemented a legacy. The world caught Pokemon fever, Game Freak found its purpose, and the success was so massive, it would carry them for decades. And decades, because Pikachu is forever. Pikachu's never going anywhere. He's too much money. Okay, I gotta calm down a bit. I gotta be excited there. So, when it comes to Pokemon Gold and Silver, they didn't just follow up Red and Blue. They defined what Pokemon would be for the next 25 years. Because the first game was the blueprint, that makes Gold and Silver the final draft technically. They took everything that worked, the catching, the battling, the world exploration, and said, okay, let's make that actually feel lived in. Because this is the moment Pokemon stopped being a fad, it became a franchise. Because think about it, right? Gold and Silver said, nah, we're giving you 2 regions, a real-time clock, Pokemon genders, breeding, shiny variants, and actual game balance. So, the second generation didn't just expand on the game, and I'm about to say something super corny, but I don't care, it evolved it. These games would establish the entire Pokemon formula we still use today. Held items, day-night cycles, breeding Pokemon, 2 new types, and finally, a nerf to Psychic Pokemon, because let's not lie, Mewtwo and Alakazam were actual demons in Gen 1. They would just sweep the entirety of the Elite Four. Like, there was no competition anymore with those two. It's crazy. That's not an accident, that's innovation. No, even better yet, that's world building through design. But the real power of Gold and Silver doesn't just stop at mechanics, it was the meaning. The games made the world feel bigger, like your adventure actually mattered. And then, just when you thought it was over, boom, and I'm gonna say boom one more time because this part was so crazy, you got a whole separate region. You went back to Kanto, and that alone is enough reason why this might be your favorite game of the franchise, because that twist, I'm pretty sure, revolutionized your little childhood brain, because it did for me. Because when I beat the game for the first time, and then I realized there's a whole other game behind the credits, I didn't know how to handle it. Personally, I think I had a panic attack, and I might have died. I'm not sure. I wasn't there. That's improv. I didn't even write that. That was just improvising. So stupid. Because this twist connected the generations together, leading into one of the best, if not the best, final battles in all of Pokemon, facing off against Red, the silent protagonist from the first game. This wasn't just nostalgia bait, this is Pokemon Legacy in motion. You got to be a part of history, and you didn't know it because little Timmy and little Johnny and every other little kid in America didn't know what they were handling at the time was probably going to be one of the best parts of your childhood, and you didn't know it, but at the same time, you kind of knew it. Okay, hey, sorry to interject, this is editing Remy. So, a little bit of clarity, I was like, I figured I should work this in somewhere, but I didn't figure out where until I was recording it, so whatever. So, for me, I didn't actually play Red and Blue version first, I played Gold and Silver. That's why I'm so passionate about this, I love those games. So, I didn't know who Red was the first time. I thought it was Ash. I legit thought it was Ash. Because when the first Pokemon game it came out where I lived, it was definitely during the Satanic Panic era, so Pokemon were just demons, and in my household, we couldn't play with demons. So, yeah, they weren't playing with that. And so by the time I played Gold and Silver, I had to trade it for like one of my Mega Man X games or something in a summer camp, and I played it for the first time. I'm like, yo, this is amazing. This is crack cocaine. I love this stuff. So, yeah, so when I fought Red for the first time, I thought it was Ash. So it didn't hit as heavy as it did for a lot of people that played Gen 1. But soon after I beat Gold and Silver, I went to GameStop and got Gen 1. So, you know, I got it eventually. It just took me a while. So, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. I didn't technically play the games in the correct order at first because I started at Gold and Silver, and then I went to Red because I didn't play Blue because I like Charizard. I'm a dragon dude. I'm basic. And, you know, then I went the traditional route. I got Ruby. Then we got Diamond and Pearl. And then, you know, so on and so forth. And then I took a break from Pokemon for a long time because I thought I was too cool for it. And eventually I came back. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. Just wanted to clarify that real fast. Okay, back to the script now. Bye! Because the fact that you got to run the Fade with Red one more time is incredible. Because Red and Blue introduced us to Pokemon, but Gold and Silver, you got to see your growth and development with the franchise, and you got to fight your past self, which is insane. Because this proved that Pokemon wasn't a one-time thing. They didn't capture lightning in a bottle once, it was a storm that would never stop. So, while the first games built the house, Gold and Silver added electricity, water, plumbing, and every other thing you need to run a house. It's incredible. It's amazing. And these games mean so much to me. Because this was the moment Pokemon stopped being just a cool new idea for people to play with every once in a while. It became a cultural juggernaut that we still talk about today. Because I'm gonna complain about Pokemon having crappy games every time they put out a crappy game, but I know deep down I'm probably gonna buy the stupid thing because I like the little mons. I'm a stupid person, and if you put Electivire in a game, I'm probably gonna buy the game because he's my stupid favorite Pokemon, that stupid looking ape thing that has a horrible shiny, but I don't care. I'm so indoctrinated in this stupid Pokemon world. So I'm gonna play the Pokemon rap. No, I'm not. Just come on. Just continuing, man. So while the games were printing money, the anime was also printing your childhood. That doesn't make sense, it doesn't matter. By the time Pokemon Gold and Silver had dropped, Ash Ketchum was already a household name, which was wild because we did not know this man's career would last over 2 decades as a 10-year-old. He is the experience you don't have for that job you do want. But back to the anime. The anime had just wrapped up the Kanto and Orange Island arcs and was ready to evolve into the next generation, Johto. And these arcs will be known as the Pokemon series Gold and Silver, which a lot of fans call the Johto Saga, which I'm gonna be brave and say this, has some of the best openings in all of Pokemon. Like, I get it, you can fire me up in the comments, whatever. Dog, I'm sorry, Master Quest? Or what are we talking about here? Like, that shit's hard, dog. That's just a hard opening. I would play it, but copyright scares me. So at the start of Season 3, aka Johto Journeys, Ash rolls into a brand new region with the same confidence we've come to love over the years, and the same Pikachu that refuses to evolve. But this time, we have new Pokemon, new friends, and a whole new vibe. This aired from the late 1990s through the 2000s in the US, but then came Season 4, Johto League Champions. Ash gets more badges, meets even more Pokemon, and continues pretending he's not breaking the rules by telling his Pokemon to dodge mid-fight. Like, my guy doesn't know this is turn-based combat. You can't just do that. That's cheating. but this series ran from 2000 to 2001. During the peak of Pokemania, where literally every school lunch table had at least one kid that knew the Pokerap word for word and beat for beat. I'm not gonna say who it was. It wasn't me because I couldn't watch Pokemon back then. I still did, but I couldn't. If I couldn't play the games, I definitely couldn't watch the anime. But regardless of that fact, we are finally at Season 5, Master Quest, which is definitively, in my opinion, one of the best openings of all of Pokemon. If you disagree with me, we can go bar for bar in the comments. If you go low, I will go lower defending this song. You have been warned. There are no more warning shots. But regardless, this was the final arc in the Johto era. As battles to the Johto League faces real competition for once, it actually shows some growth before heading off into Hoenn. So while the games were teaching you about types and the time of day, the anime was teaching you about the power of friendship and Pikachu yelling Thunderbolt to solve all your life's problems, because if your name is Ash, that tends to work. So the Johto saga didn't just complement the games, it amplified them. The timing of this anime was kinda perfect. You gotta love good marketing. While new Pokemon were appearing on TV, the video games were popping up right on shelves. So kids were seeing Totodile and Cyndaquil and the other one doing really cool things on Saturday morning cartoon shows. You knew you could do the exact same thing in your head, because the Game Boy Color wasn't doing that. But in your head, you could imagine doing the same thing on your game console. It was thanks to this marketing that helped make Pokemon become this unstoppable juggernaut that it is today. Turning gameplay into storytelling, turning storytelling into money, these guys made a formula and everyone else tried to copy it. Because when you get it right, when you get it so right, only imitators can follow. Shout out Power World, y'all getting sued. And if the anime wasn't enough, the movies only pushed this agenda even more, that this franchise was here to stay. So by the time the Johto era hit, Pokemon wasn't just a TV show anymore. It was a full-blown cinematic universe before Marvel even made that the business model. Every year we get a new Pokemon movie, each one bigger, shinier, and somehow more emotional and about friendship every time. And when it came to the Gold and Silver movies, Johto films didn't just expand the lore, they showed us the power of new legendary Pokemon from the games. So when it comes to the Johto movies, you literally have to start at Pokemon 3, the movie, The Spell of the Unknown, Entei, which came out in the 2000s. Man, my lower back just hurt reading that. That was 25 years ago. Goodness. This, oh man. This one went hard on the Johto vibes. When a young girl's imagination spirals out of control, the unknown literally warps reality, and her fantasy about her dad turns him into Entei, which, you know what? Why not? Unknown are weird, Arceus lore, so they could probably do that. Then after that, we got Mewtwo Returns in the 2000s also. Technically a TV special, but like honestly, it was a spiritual sequel to the first movie. It follows Mewtwo after the first movie, trying to find peace for himself and his clone Pokemon. It was quieter, more reflective. It's like if Pokemon asked Mewtwo, yo dog, what if your villain arc was you just needing a hug? And like, you didn't have to do that. And he got it in this one. It was pretty cool. And finally, we come to Pokemon Forever, Celebi, the Voice of the Forest, that released in 2001. This one has time travel. Yes, time travel. We have jumped the shark in 2001 when it comes to Pokemon movies. But for this movie, we're introduced to Celebi and gave Suicune his first highlight moment, because we didn't know Suicune would become one of the staple legendaries that they would just constantly bring back in almost everything, because they just love Suicune over there, man. Give Victini some more stuff. Victini's cool. He's got a V. Like, he's cool, man. Give Victini some more movies. I don't know. But back on topic, this movie proved that Pokemon can make people care about things that they normally wouldn't think about, say nature, for example. And side note, Oak looks weird as a kid, but that's neither here nor there. Pretty much, these movies were Pokemon's way of saying we're not just Saturday morning cartoons anymore, we're kind of cinema. But more importantly, they expanded the emotional range of the franchise. These movies took these pixelated creatures from your Game Boy screens and made them feel mystical, legendary, and in a really weird way, kind of real. These movies help Pokemon transcend mediums. So the games built the foundation, the animes kind of made the walls, so the movies were the roof to cover it all together to make this one solid house. And that's pretty cool. But like any good house, you need a little bit extra to make it good, some furnishing. And I'm gonna get off this house analogy now because I feel kind of stupid saying it, but all these elements kind of lead into the redheaded stepchild of the Pokemon franchise. See, redheaded because it's silver. I'm funny. Haha, like and subscribe. I'm sorry. Is the manga. Okay, now we gotta talk about the manga. So I'm gonna say something super original that no one on YouTube has ever said. I mean, it's just me. I'm the first one. Trust me, 100% trust me. The Pokemon manga is super dark. Ooh, people get murdered, monsters die, Okay, we're good. I said the thing. We can move past it. There's a million YouTube videos on why the Pokemon manga is so much darker than you imagine or whatever. Continuing. Okay, while most fans grew up with the anime, the Pokemon manga, also known as Pocket Monster Special in Japan, has always been the game's more darker counterpart. For a funny example, imagine if Ash always had his hat backwards the entire time, so you know he was constantly serious. And in the manga, unlike the anime, which loosely follows the game's structures, the adventure manga stuck closer to the original version of the Pokemon creator Satoshi's vision. The manga presents the story where trainers actually face danger and the stakes were genuinely real. The Pokemon Adventure manga first began serialization back in March of 1997. Written by Hidenori Soka, it was illustrated by Mato for volumes 1 through 9, before Satoshi Yamato took over from volume 10 onwards. And believe it or not, the manga is still ongoing, currently adapting the Scarlet and Violet era of games, making it one of the longest running game-based manga series in existence. So let's go back, because one, I don't want to talk about Scarlet and Violet because I'll just get angry. We're here to talk about the Gold and Silver and Crystal arcs, volume 8 through 15. This marked the series' third change of main character. The previous one is being Red and Yellow. And side note, I feel like people don't give Yellow her flowers. Yellow put in work in the manga series, but that's neither here nor there. This new arc introduced our main new trio of Pokédex holders, all with distinct personalities and intertwined fates. We have Gold, our main character, nicknamed the Hatcher, is a cocky but big-hearted trainer who specializes in raising Pokemon from eggs, which sounds kinda weird, but like he makes it work in the manga. Also, they made Gold's Togepi a little gremlin. I love that thing. It's a little demon. It's so great. I love Gold's Togepi. Then we have Silver, the brooding yet mysterious boy who's introduced as a generic Pokemon thief, but as the story goes on, you find out he's actually gone through some things. Eventually, it's revealed that he was kidnapped by a crazy villain who, if you played the games first before reading this, would genuinely kind of surprise you because you're like, oh, wait, it's him? Okay, I didn't expect that. And finally, we have Crystal, the catcher. She's a skilled Pokemon researcher helping the professor complete the Pokédex. Her whole gimmick is that she kicks balls. And no, I'm not saying that wrong. Yeah, you heard it right. That's what she does. She kicks Pokeballs. Don't be weird about it. But I'm gonna summarize the manga arc real fast. For the most part, overall, it's very similar to the video games. The story starts off with Silver stealing Totodile, and then the professor asks Gold to get him back with Cyndaquil. Team Rocket shows up, yada yada yada. But then we get into the Masked Man arc stuff, and that's when it's like, oh, the dark joke he made earlier is actually very true, because like, what was going on with this one? Price, yes, Price is the masked man that went around kidnapping children, all to get Celebi. Which, I get it, time travel is a pretty impressive power, but you have the Ice Gym Leader kidnapping kids, which is like, whoa, wait, what? This is the old man? The old man was doing this? The evil old man? Yeah, it was crazy. And if that wasn't enough, we have the Epic Gym Leader Tournament, which is like such a cool concept. I wish they would flesh out in video games. I mean, they kind of did in black and white, but like it's not the exact same thing. Regardless though, this entry into the manga is a bold cinematic arc that captures the spirit of Gold and Silver. It shows growth and legacy and the idea that even in a world full of monsters, you can still be free from your dark past with help from your friends and your little creatures that can shoot fire and stuff. And it was so hyped for me as a kid, it literally made me go out of my way to buy Gold version again for my Game Boy Advance. This manga got me so hyped to play this game again. And you know what? It was right to do so because Gold and Silver is so good. And don't get me wrong, Red and Blue are both really hyped, but don't get me wrong, these games, especially back then, were 100% improvements. So if Red, Blue, and Yellow were kind of the rough sketches of what Pokemon could be, Gold, Silver, and Crystal were the polished masterpieces. Because these were the moments where the series finally found its rhythm. Because as I keep saying and I keep emphasizing, these weren't just sequels, they were the evolutionary leap that defined Pokemon for the next few decades. For the first time, the games actually told time. And I get it, that doesn't sound that impressive nowadays, but back then on my Game Boy Color, it's so stupid that I found this was hype, but I remember when I was a kid, I'd be like, oh snap, it's night outside and it's night in the game. And now I gotta try to be quiet because I can't wake up my little brother, and if my mom walks in, I'm getting in trouble. Because we all know you can't play late on a school night. That's not how this works. But this day-night cycle wasn't just an aesthetic thing, it made Johto feel alive, it also affected the in-game world. Certain Pokemon would only appear in different hours, certain evolutionary things would only happen during the day and night, which also leads to the best Eevee evolution, I will die on this hill, Espeon. That's right, Espeon. That's the best one. Even his shinies height. Don't at me, please don't. I'll crumble under the pressure. But I won't fight that hard for this one. This game also gave Ditto its first real job, being an absentee father, because breeding had entered the scene. This game marked the entry of Pokemon genders, eggs, and inherited moves. Suddenly, raising Pokemon wasn't just about training and having an HM slave, it was about genetics, planning, and optimization. I mean, you still had the HM slave, that didn't disappear till kind of recently, but you know, like, maybe he had an egg with Ditto that wasn't an HM slave, you know, maybe that's how this works. This is kind of dark. Where am I going with this? Oh my. anyway off of eugenics and back to less dark eugenics, you could pass on egg moves in this one. And in the crystal version, you were even able to manipulate the Pokemon's natures. It was these seemingly small touches that would later become cornerstones of competitive play in Pokemon. And not to mention, this generation introduced hold items, which gave Pokemon battles a whole new layer of strategy and evolution. A simple berry could turn the tide of a fight, leftovers became a staple for every first run in a Pokemon game, and Metal Coat and King's Rock gave cool new evolutions to two staple Pokemon from Gen 1. And if we move more into the VGC territory, this is the gym where we got the first balance patch for Pokemon, because this game gave us the introduction of Dark and Steel types, which balanced out the meta and gave rise to fan favorites like Umbreon, not my favorite, but someone, and Steelix. And if that wasn't enough, we got introduced to a new kind of rarity that would haunt Pokemon / Dex completers for years, the shiny Pokemon. Those 1 in 1,000 alternate colors versions. And if that wasn't enough improvement on the base game, obviously the candle thing, I don't have to keep saying the candle thing, I'll praise the candle thing to the end of my life, but still, it was still really cool that it was there. There was 8 more badges, a red fight, Mount Silver itself was kind of an adventure in its own right. This is, if not the best post-game Pokemon has ever done in any of their games. It was a perfect way to bridge generations, and honestly, they need to bring this back. They got so close in Sun and Moon where they kind of played with the idea where Red showed up again, but that's not it. I need the real thing. It's been decades, man, decades. We just got the Switch 2, bring it back, man. Oh my gosh, Pokemon, you have all the money. Please, just bring it back, man. That's all I want. Just give me 2 regions, man, please. Excuse me, I got a bit excited there. Continuing. I gotta bring up Crystal if we're talking about Gen 2. Crystal refined everything even further, introducing animated sprites, which blew my mind as a kid, a female character and faster movements, a smoother PC box management, and just a bunch of quality of life stuff that seems like a no-brainer now, but back then was revolutionary. In every sense, Gold, Silver, and Crystal weren't just sequels. They were the evolution of what could be and what is now currently. They took everything to define Red, Blue, and Green version and made them feel more alive, real, and infinitely replayable. So for many fans, Johto wasn't just another stop on the Pokemon journey, it was the moment the series became a staple for millions of people across the world. And okay, I guess I should probably do this because I do this in all my videos. I'll talk about the story. Believe it or not, these games do have stories. It's nothing crazy because, you know, it's Pokemon. All their stories are in the mangas or in the anime, not in the video games really. But here we go. You begin in the peaceful New Bark Town, while Professor Elm sends you off for one of the 3 new starters, Cyndaquil, Totodile, and I guess there's Chikorita, that one's there. And he gives you the simple mission of just completing the Pokédex. But as always in Pokemon, this simple mission quickly spirals into a 10-year-old saving the world or throwing hands with organized crime. Sometimes even both. But along this journey, you meet your rival, the red-headed thief with a chip on his shoulder. He isn't your Saturday morning cartoon bad boy. He's bitter, angry, and determined he's better than you at all things. And not gonna lie, I love this. I miss this. I like when my rivals wanted to put me in the dirt. I don't like this whole buddy-buddy thing that we do now in Pokemon, bro. Give me someone that wants to piss on my grave again, bro. I miss Blue. I miss Silver. I miss the haters, bro. The haters only make me want to do better. Hey, I don't get that. I don't get that no more. Hop is whatever, bro. You had only friends in, like, was it X and Y? And the Mona was cool. Don't get me wrong. I like Pokemon Goku, but I need a rival that hates me breathing the same air as they do. I need that back. I need the hater, bro. The hater makes me stronger. It makes me feel better when I put them in the dirt myself. I miss that. I miss the rivalry, bro. I don't want a friendly rival. I don't need a berry, bro. I need a hater. Regardless, though, you meet your rival at this point, and he's even more of a bad guy than you expect because he stole the starter from Professor Elm's lab. But as the story unfolds, you find out that he's honestly just a kid with a lot going on. Meanwhile, Team Rocket's back, clinging to their former glory like a singer from the early 2000s that only had one good album. Because they're no longer the old powerful syndicate, they're desperate, fragmented, and willing to do anything to reclaim their name. Whether it's hijacking a radio tower or even forcing Magikarps to evolve, they're just out here doing anything to get Giovanni's attention again. But eventually you'll beat Team Rocket, and along the way you'll collect all 8 bads, and then eventually you'll head up to the Elite Four, where eventually you meet Lance as the champion. Then you run the set as the Dragon Master from Kanto shows you why he's the new Johto champion, except he doesn't because you beat him. And then eventually you get crowned Johto champion, but it turns out that was actually just halftime, because this game gets back up and says, I ain't hear no bell, and gets ready to swing again. Turns out you're going to Kanto now to fight 8 more gym leaders and see that the Kanto region got a lot stronger in the couple years you've been away. And all this leads up to the final battle at Mount Silver. No music, no fanfare, just snow, silence, and the weight of everything that came before. And at the summit stands the one, the only Red, the silent protagonist from the original games. Beating him isn't just beating the final boss. When you beat him, you realize you finally passed the torch from the previous generation to something new, something better, and something a little bit shinier. And that's what makes Gold and Silver's story so timeless. Not because it's the most narrative-heavy thing, for all that it stands for and all that it symbolizes. This is one of the best ways to pass the torch in a gaming franchise, in my opinion. It respects the source materials, it improves on the base game, and the post-game being just going back to the old game is incredible. If that happened on any modern game, that would blow people's minds like it did back then. That's why you know this was so crazy. Because this tied two generations together in a way that no Pokemon game has done on this level, giving players not only a sense of closure, but also the feeling that the Pokemon world was growing right alongside them. This wasn't just a continuation. This was a conversation with the past, and in the only way Pokemon can, with a fight. Okay, so I kind of hinted at this earlier, but there's a reason why Gold and Silver almost didn't happen, right? So when Gold and Silver was released, the Game Boy Color was far from cutting edge, if you can imagine, right? But Game Freak somehow pulled off the impossible, fitting 2 entire regions, 100 new Pokemon, a real-time clock, and countless new features on a 1 megabyte cartridge. And the secret to this madness? Relentless efficiency. Game Freak programmers wrote incredibly tight code, squeezing every drop of performance out of that hardware. It's like building a skyscraper on top of a shed. And at the center of this technical marvel was Satoru Iwata. And yes, that Iwata, who would later become Nintendo's beloved president. He developed a faster data decompression algorithm for the game's graphics, speeding up loading times and helping the entire world of Gold and Silver run smoother. Man, when I tell you, this wasn't just coding, it was art. Okay, I lied. I only know HTML, CSS, and a little Java. Don't ask me any real coding questions. I'm not telling you about Python or something. I can make you a website and that's about it. But just hearing about it sounds impressive. Because Gold and Silver wasn't just a technical flex, it symbolized what Pokemon was always about: discovery, connections, and the joy of finding that unexpected thing when you're not looking for it, like a second game inside of the game. And with that out the way, this finally brings us to the next stage of evolution, the remakes. The games that prove that capturing lightning in a bottle can happen all over again, HeartGold and SoulSilver. If Pokemon Gold and Silver were the golden age of childhood discovery, then HeartGold and SoulSilver were the perfect nostalgic revival. And proof that Game Freak knows exactly how to tug at the heartstrings when they want to, because they don't want to a lot. But regardless, HeartGold and SoulSilver released in 2009 in Japan and 2010 worldwide to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the originals. These DS remakes didn't just polish up the past, they reinvented it. Many fans still consider these the definitive Pokemon experience, a rare example of lightning striking twice. So why exactly did this happen? Well, apparently Game Freak wanted to give a new generation of people a chance to explore Johto without having to dig out their old Game Boy Color. And not to mention, this was following the success from Fire Red and Leaf Green, so HeartGold and SoulSilver just kind of made sense to do next. And not to mention, these weren't lazy remakes. HeartGold and SoulSilver crammed in so much content and polish, it was almost absurd. The DS touchscreen made navigating menus smoother than ever, the soundtrack got a full orchestral facelift, and then we got to talk about the one feature that made the game the best in the franchise to that point. Yo man, your Pokemon can walk in the overworld, which is so simple. Like it's surprising that they only did it at this point, but you know what? It doesn't matter. We finally got it. Nothing beats the feeling of seeing Typhlosion and you walking into a new town. And yes, Typhlosion, he's the best one. If you just ignore the leaks from a little while ago, that was a different Typhlosion, man. We don't acknowledge him in the community. That was a bad one. that was the worst one. Oh goodness, the leaks were crazy. But besides from the overworld walking ability, you also got the Pokeathon, a surprisingly addictive minigame. It wasn't the best, mind you, but at the same time, it was kind of something fun to do when you're first starting off the game before you had to get serious. Because obviously, it's not like they could bring back gambling in these games for like reasons that we all kind of know. But here it is if you don't know. Here's the context. But you couldn't do that again. We're not as cool anymore. Unless we're talking about prize picks, baby, because everything's gambling now. Have you seen a gacha game? Everything is gambling. It's ridiculous. And if that wasn't enough, we got even more content. They updated the story. They gave us the Gen 4 physical special split and even Pokewalkers. No one still has a Pokewalker. If you do, yo, maybe send it to me somehow. I'd like one. But regardless, they gave you so much with these games. It's ridiculous. And just when you thought it couldn't get any bigger, obviously, they had the Kanto region back, and they expanded that even more. They even gave trainers a chance to catch other powerful legendaries like Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza. This wasn't just a remake, this was a love letter in a cartridge, and all the fans knew it, to such an extent that the combined sales of both games was over 12 million units, outselling even the newer Pokemon game that just dropped, Pokemon Platinum. So if that wasn't clear enough, when you look back at Pokemon Gold and Silver, it's not just nostalgia that makes them special, it's how they captured lightning in a bottle twice. These games weren't just sequels. They were proof that Pokemon could grow, evolve, and still surprise us. So while they come from humble origins, a small overworked studio led by people who truly loved the world they were building, Game Freak didn't just make a follow-up. They doubled the cartridge size and rewrote how handheld games could function and somehow fit 2 entire regions on one tiny cartridge. That's not just smart design, that might just straight up be magic. And even going past the Game Boy handheld screen, on the big screen, Johto gave us an era full of unforgettable moments. Entei's illusionary warmth, Mewtwo's search for peace, and Celebi's time-twisting friendship. All stories that mirrored the themes from the games themselves: growth, loss, and connections. Even the anime reflected that shift, maturing with its audience while keeping the sense of wonder intact. Then HeartGold and SoulSilver came out years later, reminding us why we loved the games in the first place. With updated graphics and a bunch of quality of life, these updates made everything feel both new and familiar at the same time, like revisiting your childhood home for the first time and finding out, no, it's still as amazing as I remember it. And for millennials, these games weren't just pixels on screens. They were late nights under the blanket with a Game Boy Light. They were the first time you saw a sunrise in a game world. They were the time you first saw a shiny Gyarados in a lake that was just mad at everything. They were the time you realized there was a second game hidden beneath the game you just beat. So, Gold and Silver aren't just remembered because they were great games. They remembered because they grew up with us. They taught us that evolution isn't just for Pokemon, it's for people too. And maybe that's the hidden miracle of Johto. Not the technology, not the nostalgia, but the reminder that sometimes the greatest journeys aren't about where you're going next. Sometimes it's about looking back, smiling, and realize just how far you've come. So, hey, I'm Remy. Thanks for listening to me over-explain the history of Pokemon Gold and Silver. Thank you so much. This video was so long. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hack the video. I will see y'all in the next one. Y'all be easy. Later. Bye! Okay, hey, end of the video. Once again, thank you guys if you got to this part. I know my videos are kind of long. I'm thinking about cutting them down a bit, but like for right now, we're doing long format stuff until I feel like, you know what, I gotta either break these apart or just cut them down entirely. But until then, I hope you enjoy the long formats. And I really enjoyed that this video was a long one because honestly, dude, I love Pokemon. If you couldn't tell from my whole overly animated self on this video, I love Pokemon. I hate it at the same time, but I also really love it. And it's just because I expect so much more from this IP because you gave me Peak years ago and you just don't do it again. And I don't get why. Just come on, guys. I know you can do it. You have all the money. You guys can do it. I believe in you. Hire some more coders or something. I don't know. I don't have high expectations for Pokemon, so if they give me the bare minimum, I'm happy with it, but still, you guys can do so much more with it, and it's fine that you don't, I guess. But still, that doesn't matter. That's my own personal thing. Regardless, I'm really glad this video turned out the way it did. It took me a while to figure out how I wanted to do this. That's why it took so long also. But still, once again, I think this is a pretty good video. I laughed, I cried. I didn't really cry, but I had fun regardless. So thank you for watching this video if you got this far. I will see you guys in the next one. It has been so real, and Espeon is the best evolution. I'm going to go out on that. Goodbye. No time to question my moves, yeah. I stick to the path that I choose, yeah. I mean, my friends, come on, like, come on. It's such a good song, dog. You can't, like, what are we doing here? Okay, I'm gone for real this time. Okay, bye. Bye.